Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the of the Duval Rundown show. My name is Gus Logue. This show is brought to you by Injury Care Centers. We are going to break down the Jaguars' loss at home to the Cleveland Browns. Final score 13-18. We got Hacker here that's going to join in a second. Just got to text the link to Tommy McManus. So just stand by for a few seconds and then we'll start taking your questions and stuff like that. All right, Hacker, welcome. How you doing?
Oh, Gus, I couldn't be better, man. After that performance, boy, what a tough one again. 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, pretty tough stuff. They had us there in the first half. It actually almost seemed like it was going to be a reverse of the Miami game in week 1, where the Jags kind of came out cold, but then really turned up in the second half, kind of like how the Dolphins did to them in week 1. But then the Jags just ultimately weren't able to finish the job, finish the deal. Just FYI to everyone who's tuning in, if you want to comment, we want to make this as interactive with you as possible. And so if you want to comment, make sure to just click the actual video on live and comment under there, rather than like going to the Facebook post and commenting on the Facebook post itself. So hopefully that'll make sense. Hacker, I guess if we have to assign blame to one person, who would you assign a blame to if I had to go to one person?
The offensive line was not good today at all. The offense didn't really do anything. I didn't like the play calling again. The defense, I think, did a pretty good job considering you're without Darnell Savage, you're without Tyson Campbell, Mason Smith, your second-round pick, I presume was a healthy scratch. I mean, we didn't see him on the injury report all week, and then he doesn't play. Despite that, the defense, particularly in the second half, played their tails off. It's a head-scratcher. I mean, the offense was horrible for about the first 40 minutes, 45 minutes of this game, the first 3 quarters. It was awful. And look, Cleveland played terribly as well, right? I mean, Cleveland won the game. Amari Cooper had an inexplicable drop. They had a fumble recovery overturned because their kicker was offsides on the new kickoff rule.
Right.
I mean, their running back grabbed Antonio Johnson's face mask, or else that's a guaranteed 3 points, and maybe they iced it with a touchdown anyway. They committed like 13 penalties. I mean, the Browns were awful today, and they still came into Jacksonville and won the game. That, to me, is, man, Gus, that's concerning. You did not get beat by a good team today. You got beat by what I think is an average team who did not play very well. That's something people need to realize.
For sure. I mean, like you said, the Browns didn't play their best game whatsoever, and especially when you go consistently quarter to quarter, they definitely gave the Jaguars plenty of opportunities to win. Obviously they had the kind of fourth quarter penalties that pushed them back, and they had to punt and instead of kicking the field goal. And then even after Lawrence took the safety with about 2 minutes left, the Jags got the ball back again, but still weren't able to again finish the job.
Well, Watson throwing that ball on third down was insane. Why he didn't take the sack to let 40 seconds run off the clock? That's what I'm saying. Cleveland played terribly today, and they still won the game. So I said this on social media, and I like doing this with you, and then I'm going to go do the 5th quarter with Leon and Coach here in about 90 minutes.
Yep.
My expectations now for the Jaguars after today, honestly, are probably 0. I'm going to enjoy the games for what they are, but any talk about division this or 9 or 10 wins or anything like that, to me, has been erased. I mean, it's a one game at a time, 1 week at a time. Now, I usually like to look ahead. There's no point in doing that because the way the South looks right now, keep in mind, Tennessee and Indy both lost today too. Everybody's 0-2. Houston probably wins tonight. Houston's going to win this division by Thanksgiving at this rate. So it's bad times, not only here, but trust me, they're not happy in Indianapolis or in Nashville right now either.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty tough losing to the nasty man, but I guess it's a little bit better than losing to Malik Willis. Either way, it's not great, though. It feels like football fans in Northeast Florida just need to find a new sport or a new hobby or something, the way that the Jags, the Seminoles, and the Gators have all started the 2024 seasons.
They're 1-7. One
Yeah.
and 7. The Jaguars. I don't know what North Florida football fans did this offseason. They must have wronged somebody in another life over 6 months. 1-7 for the Seminoles, the Gators, and the Jaguars. It's not good, man. It's not good at all.
Reedy commented on YouTube, throw it up for BTJ more. Yeah, I think that's kind of like one takeaway you could have after back-to-back games is that Brian Thomas made, one really big play in this game and a small handful of big plays in the Miami game. And so we're all just kind of like left questioning if he's doing so well on just like a small number of targets. There's kind of the thing that like when you get an uptick in volume, usually there's a little bit of a decrease in efficiency, but still, I think it's a fair question for people to say Brian Thomas Jr. is flashing and hasn't really shown us a reason why he shouldn't get more targets. And so that's definitely something that's a little bit of a head scratcher.
You drafted the guy in the first round, maybe throw him the football. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're paying Christian Kirk all that money, maybe throw him the football. He's going to Gabe Davis a lot. We don't know the extent of Gabe Davis's injury, but he came out towards the end of the game, looked like a shoulder. I don't want to speculate, but this offense is not good right now.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the offensive line. And look, I've defended Trent Baalke. In fact, I self-proclaimed myself the president of the Baalke fan club this offseason. I thought he was very good, and I did think he did some good things. He did not address the offensive line. You bring in Mitch Morse, and that's great, but Browns are running right up the middle and getting after Trevor. ETN most of the time has no room whatsoever. Cam Robinson was awful today. The drive that everybody's going to talk about in the third quarter, I think it was like the first drive of the third quarter maybe for the Jags. They had 2 sacks. Those were both Cam Robinson's fault, I think. Now, again, I'm going to ask Leon, and we'll find out, from the guys that actually played the game. I'm just a Wolfson JV offensive lineman, Gus. But watching 74 back on those 2 plays, the one, he didn't get over in time to get the linebacker, and the other, he just got flat out beat. And man, that is not good. The offensive line was a problem last year, and it looks like it's still a big problem right now.
Totally. All right, let's try to bring in Tom McManus to join us. Oh, nice. All right, we got 3 people going. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I thought we had the 3 best offensive tackles in the entire National Football League going into this year. What happened to that, I don't know, man.
I always talk about, Tommy, real quick, I always talk about, man, June, July, and August are the months of hope. September is the month of reality in the NFL, and reality has smacked Jacksonville in the face in the last 7 days.
Yeah, and listen, look, and there'll be a lot of, reasons why, and hey, Baltimore's 0-2 now, so let's not worry about it that much. Everybody in the AFC South is 0-2 other than Houston, so it'll be okay. Look, man, I'm just sick and tired of the bullshit, to be honest with you. And I'm sorry if you're not allowed to swear on this thing, but it comes down to performance, man. It comes down to doing your damn job. Like, you're a professional football player and coaches. It's all the same thing. And heck, I echo your sentiment on the offensive line. All we heard, hey, wait a minute. This starting 5 hasn't started together more than 1 game. So, come on. You haven't seen them in action. Well, I think we've seen them in action, and they're not very good. Our offense doesn't score points. Our defense at times looks great, and then at times it can't get off the gosh darn field, although today they did a great job on 3rd down. It's just a combination. You know what? It comes down to what? Inconsistent play, just like last year. You look good? Like, for instance, you throw the bomb to Brian Thomas Jr., what, late in the 3rd quarter? Mid-3rd quarter? You wait till then? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, that should be once a quarter. Max protect, send the young dude down the field. I don't know. Take a chance. It's just amazing. Look, to me, it's once again inconsistency. Players will look great at times. They'll look bad at times. Take our quarterback. Looks great today at times. doesn't look great. Our offensive line kind of sometimes gives him time. Then they don't give him time when he really needs it. We stop the run. Then when we need to stop the run, we can't stop the run. It's just it's not the markings of a good team. And that's, I think, what's really frustrating again. Now, look, in all reality, it's 2 games. I know what the stats show. I know what they show. Look, at the best, they got to hopefully fight for a wild card spot at the end. There's a lot of football left to be played. But let's be honest. You got Buffalo. They're no easy task. They're going to be looking for blood after you beat them in London last year. You got Houston. We'll see them tonight against Chicago. We'll see how they do. But they look, you could be 0-4. I don't know what the stats are in the NFL when you're 0-4, but I know you are going home after the season. I know that. So.
John Ladisa asked on Facebook, who are we drafting? I feel like that's kind of a popular, just funny meme. Is just automatically we're looking forward to draft season because, there's 15 more games left in the regular season. But after this 0-2 start, it just feels a lot differently than even last year when the Jags got off to a little bit of a slow start. Because I know they started out like 8-3 halfway through the year. But in the first 1 or 2 games, it wasn't really looking too hot. And then they kind of righted the ship during the London trip. And so we'll see if that happens again. There was like kind of infamous quotes coming from the team about how they were able to kind of drown out the noise, and it was good to get out of town during that London trip. And so it'll be interesting to see just what happens next month.
A lot of football left to be played. I think we can, the whole any kind of promotion we're doing over there down at Everbank, TV commercials, name of the state, whatever. Can we just get rid of that stuff and let's focus on just playing ball? And I know they are, but it ain't working for whatever reason. So I don't know. I don't know where they go from here. What do you do? You go back to the drawing board. You hold them accountable for every single play, and hopefully they can turn it around quick because it's not getting any easier, heck.
Well, I'll tell you this, too. Look, I like Trevor. I'm happy he's here. I'm happy he's the long-term guy, and it's not all on his plate. But he's the quarterback, so you got to bring it up. You realize the last game he won was that Houston game in Week 12 last year?
Yeah.
The last game he won. Beathard was the quarterback against Carolina. So you're talking, what is that, 6?
1-6. I think he's 1-6 since then.
And then the team has lost 7 of 8. It's very frustrating. And I think you saw Doug Peterson last week in the press conferences. Doug's normally kind of joking around, kidding around. Gus, you're at all the press conferences. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I thought Doug was a little salty last week. I thought he was, a lot more serious than he normally is because the losses are starting to take a toll on everybody. And I can't imagine what they're going to be like this week because, again, you didn't win at home. You were 3-5 at home last year. That was a talking point. Win at home. They didn't do that. They lost to a team without 2 starting offensive tackles, their Pro Bowl tight end. Cleveland put 4 defensive guys on IR from last week who played last week. They were without 4 defensive guys, including Juan Thornhill, who led them in tackles. Yep. They committed 13 penalties today. They have inexcusable clock management. The Jaguars get bailed out by the officials a couple of times, and they still lose the game. It's frustrating, man. There's no question about that.
Kareem Rogers commented on Facebook, if things got to be perfect around Trevor for him to be successful, then that's a problem. He doesn't cover up any deficiencies. I think that's kind of fair at this point because I've definitely been a Trevor apologist for his whole career in Jacksonville and just kind of beating the drum that the environment around him isn't helping. And you saw that today, there was a commenter earlier who said it would be good to get Trevor more in a rhythm. And I agree with that where I think it'd be good to get him going in quick game because his mind is just as good as his physical game is, and try to press some easier buttons for him because when the Jags try to click easy button, it's a rollout bootleg on first down to start a drive, and then there's pressure in his face every time. And so I do think that there can be easier buttons pressed for Lawrence. But with that said, he's a first overall pick. He just got a big contract this year, and so I think at a certain point you do want to see him kind of just doing better than the system around him would indicate. And at some point, he really is going to have to start putting the team on his back based on just
Yeah.
Not just where he was drafted, but now the contract at this point.
Well, I noticed a lot today. He hones in on that first read and makes the throw regardless. And sometimes he hits it. Sometimes he doesn't hit. He sailed a few today. Then hit a nice throws, down the field here and there. But, I think Trev, look, he's got all the physical tools. We know that. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And he's tough as nails. I wonder if he sees everything that he needs to see. I can't blame him for wanting to get the ball out early. I mean, that line sucks. I mean, gosh damn, like all off season, like you didn't even address it. No disrespect to Foster out of Missouri, but it's a fourth rounder. But you didn't. Now, granted, I want Brian Thomas Jr., so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'd swap him. He could be our most dangerous player on the field right now. And he's good. And he doesn't play like a rookie. So I could build an offense around him, I think. You know what I mean? With what he brings to the table. But, look, it is on Trevor. He is the franchise QB, just like it's on the coach. It goes from the head coach to the quarterback, then to everybody else. It's not always his fault, but some of it is his fault. I just, look, I don't know. How did Ingram, what did he pull a hammy in warmups? What happened to Ingram?
Yeah, hamstring and warmups. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about real quick.
How was that?
Yeah, Ingram does the hamstring. Savage got hurt in practice, right? I mean, what's going on there? How do you lose a starter in practice and Evan pulls a hamstring? Mason Smith being a scratch. I mean, guys, he wasn't on the injury report all week. Now, did he get hurt too? Or was he a healthy scratch? Because if your second round pick is a healthy scratch in week 2, well, it's a very interesting situation. So
I'd like to hear more about that. I'd like to hear more about that, Hack. You're right. You're right about that. That's an interesting one. I just, here's the thing. Like, where do you go? Where do you go? Don't tell me Walker Little's going to save the day. He's not. So forget that. What do? You got Cam. Cam had an awful day. Cam didn't play well last week either. Last week the interior guys were good. The outside guys struggled. This week they all struggled for the most part. That's some good showings here and there, but overall, no. Not good enough. Even Morse got beat. The center here to save the day. He didn't save anything today. Now, granted, he needs, and ain't just him. He needs, the rest of the line to come through too. But where do you go? You don't is the thing. I mean, you don't. You got who you have. There's nobody out there in the free agent market that's going to come save you. There's no trade. I don't think that's going to help your offensive line. You got to figure this out quick, fellas. And you just spent granted, it doesn't hit for 2 years, but give your QB all this money and you don't do whatever it takes to protect him. I don't know. I think that's bad planning overall.
Yeah, part of the reason I'm not super optimistic that the team, or specifically the offense, is going to be able to turn things around is that I feel like we haven't really seen a lot of new things out of like the play design. I feel like Doug Peterson's offense was kind of like at the forefront of the league and pretty innovative back in Philadelphia when they went on the Super Bowl run. And at this point, it's still like a good offense, but it almost feels a little bit outdated because I'm not really sure what new things they're added. Like, Tom, you almost kind of like made this point when you said you could make the whole offense out of Brian Thomas Jr. Like, obviously they had the big play today, but like it doesn't really seem like they're putting him in any specific positions to succeed. If anything, it's just like they're running the same old Doug Peterson offense and just putting these new pieces into just like the old Zay Jones and Marvin Jones roles without really changing a lot. And so I think one concern going into the season was just like the lack of kind of like, I don't know, new ideas coming from the offense because obviously Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, it's kind of been their show the whole time in Jacksonville. But Jim Bob Cooter left, I believe last offseason, and I think that was actually like a low-key big brain drain. And they just haven't really brought in anyone new. And so like I feel like there was like rumblings that like Frank Reich could get like some kind of like senior assistant role on staff, or maybe like Eric Bieniemy given his just like history with Andy Reid. Obviously, that's where Doug Peterson comes from, is the Reid tree. And so yeah, I think unless they like make a new hire, which doesn't really happen during the season. So I'm a little bit lost too in terms of like how this team and specifically the offense can improve.
Well, real quick, guys, because I got to go get ready for the fifth quarter. By the way, Island Girls Cigar Bar, Gate Parkway, is where we're going to be if you want to come out. And I was going to have a victory cigar tonight. Maybe it'll be a depression cigar for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But we'll be out there beginning at around 6 o'clock, 6:15. Having to call 2 timeouts in 3 plays to avoid delay of games. You talk about the play, Gus. I mean, is what's going on in that headset between Doug Peterson and Press Taylor and Trevor Lawrence? This is not high school football. Trust me, I love the Friday Night Lights, but you see stuff like that on Friday nights. Having to call 2 timeouts in the span of 3 plays to avoid delay of games, that is nonsense in the National Football League. So, yeah, we'll do the fifth quarter coming up here in a little over an hour, and I'm sure it'll be a spirited conversation on 10.
Yeah, enjoy that, Hack. That'll be fun.
All right, we'll talk to you guys next week at Buffalo Monday night. Boy, that'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Yeah, make sure you guys check out the fifth quarter with Hacker, Leon Searcy, and Coach Dave Campo. Hack, thanks for joining us. Oops, accidentally removed Tom. Here we go. All right, Tom.
Thanks,
one question I want to ask for you is a lot of comments that we're getting is like, is the clock up on Doug? How hot is Doug's seat? So like, when do you think there would actually be like some real precedence or like a real reason to actually start thinking about Doug Peterson being on his way out from Jacksonville?
I think you take it through the end of the year unless it gets really, really bad. I mean, I will say this. The owner made it very clear what expectations are, and they are to win, and they are to win now. So he will feel the pressure, but I don't think it's a hot seat yet. You know, part of it is coaching. Don't get me wrong. Part of it's the players. I mean, you're professionals. You've got to do your job, man. You've got to do it at the highest level every single play if you really want to win in this league. And it's a combination. And I know we all want to blame this and blame that, but really, it's a combination, man. It's the coaching. Like Hack said, you know, calling timeouts to save your ass on delay of game penalties. That's like sophomoric behavior. Like, you don't do that, you know. And then they had delay of game penalties, you know. So just not a team. You know, I tell you, I commended Doug and Trent for the way they ran camp, and they're not playing like the way they ran camp at all. They're not. I thought they really had it together, you know, because it was a tough camp. It was a physical, demanding camp. The year before was like a Club Med almost, you know, as far as being physical and getting after it. So I'm surprised. Look, I think I had them beat in Cleveland. I think everybody did. I think Everbank thought this was like homecoming. Hey, let's do the promotion now because it's Cleveland and we should win. And then, you know, obviously that didn't happen the way we wanted. But this is one, again, you cost yourselves with Miami. Now this is a second AFC opponent. Now, it may not matter at the end, right? But if there are tiebreakers involved, it's going to matter. And if those two teams who were playoff teams a year ago, they may not be this year, but they were a year ago. If they're there and they got the tiebreaker over you, you're going to be kicking yourself in the ass for letting these first 2 games end up the way they are. You know, go back to Brian Thomas Jr., Gus. Like, you know what kind of weapon he is. He's a special weapon. He's probably, since Justin Blackman and before that, of course, the great Jimmy Smith, my teammate, he's got that kind of capability. Where are the crossing routes? Who's going to cover him on a crossing route? Where are the end of rounds nobody's expecting? And then where's the deep throw? I mean, you waited till mid-third quarter to throw him deep. Why?
Yeah, I don't know what's with that.
What are you doing?
I was waiting for them to throw deep the entire game just because I think even obviously like the play call worked out and it was a 66-yard completion that set up them at the goal line. And I'm pretty sure ETN punched it in on that same drive. But like even if it wasn't a completion, I think it's worth just like attempting deep throws to him in the first place just to make sure that opposing coaches kind of like see the speed that he has and are forced to respect it. And then hopefully that kind of like either opens things up for the rest of the offense, or at least you kind of like get an indicator to know like, oh, next time we'll scheme them up in this different way, or be able to learn something from it. But yeah, I think it's kind of inexcusable where obviously it's nice that it worked when it eventually happened, but I think you got to go to him a lot earlier and a lot more often.
And where's Kirk? The glue. He's the glue to the whole offense on the passing side of things. Where's he? Why isn't he a focal point in this offense? I tell you, Brenton Strange, he earned a lot of respect today, man. He got jumped into a starting role. He performed pretty well overall. He's a physical kid. You can tell he's got a lot of passion for trying to make plays. So hats off to him for stepping up in his role. I don't know what happened to Ingram. I have no idea. I don't know how you pull a hammy on game day, but you do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that they missed him. You know, I think Gabe was good. You know, they had some plays. Where was Tank today? I didn't see much of Tank. I know he got drilled.
Yeah, he got injured on that kick return. And then I believe he did come back later in the game, but then at that point, they were just kind of riding with Dearness Johnson as the backup to ETN. And I think Bigsby was only playing special teams when he returned.
Yeah. Well, just not a good showing. You know, you had a good crowd. There were a lot of Browns fans in, but we still outnumbered them. I think we were loud. We were ready to rock. I brought my two older daughters. We had a great time. It was great tailgating and great watching the game. We did leave a little early just to beat the rush, but it's just so, you know, you have all this, like Hack said, hope, and then they play the way they play. It'd be different if, you know, they looked a lot better and lost, you know, a close one. You know what I mean? I know they lost the close one, but it was bad football. They're not very good, and we're not very good. To me, it was just kind of, I don't know, ho-hum kind of football, you know, style of play. But hats off to them. Stefanski got them ready to play. You know, with all the distractions they got on that team, I got to give them credit for showing up today. You know, they're good on defense. They're physical O-line. They don't really have a running game, although I know Ford killed them on that 1/4 down. You know, that's just attention to detail. There's always somebody on the end of the line of scrimmage that you don't let anybody outside you. And once you do, the whole thing will break down. You know, that's just somebody not doing their job. You know,
Totally.
And that's what's got to change. And I mean, look, Doug should feel. I know he got tests. I don't go to the press conferences. I'm glad you guys do. I'd probably get mad anyway. He wouldn't like my questions, I don't think. But it's all good. I'd rather react anyway. But, you know, look, he should feel some pressure. You know, things are not going well. His team's not playing well. You know, key guys aren't doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. I think the effort's there, though, Gus. It's not like they're, you know, sleepwalking through the thing. I think they're trying. It's just, it ain't working. And with all these mishaps with the delay of game and whatnot, it just shows you're not as professionally tight as you need to be. And that's got to change.
For sure. They definitely have a lot of work to do before they just start going and trying to win the rest of the season and try to go 1-0 next week. Tommy, thanks for joining us. We've got Mia who's about to join us live from the field, but appreciate you coming on. We will make sure to catch Tommy on his podcast, Catching Up with Tommy Mack, which you can find on 1010XL platform.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to watch the film tomorrow morning, man, and I'll be breaking it down. I hopefully I don't get too upset on a Monday. But we'll see.
For sure.
All right. Thanks, Gus. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Go.
Oops, accidentally cut Tommy off at the end there. But Mia, how's it going? Empty stadium behind you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hopefully you can hear me, since naturally our friends just came through with the lovely, I don't know what those are called. Are those trucks or those conveyor belts of some kind? You can hear me though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. We love it. Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, just got done. Jaguars post-game locker room, obviously a pretty somber scene. I think that I would encourage everyone out there, whether you're encouraged by today's performance and you're still optimistic or you're not, I really will encourage you once we do get it online to hear from Travis Etienne. I'm going to try to post the full or as much as I can on my X account once we get done with this program, because it was the most fired up that I've heard Travis in his 3 years here in Jacksonville. To the point that PR went over to him and said, "Hey, like, are you good? Because we know you're a little heated right now." And that wasn't to mean that he was fighting with his teammates. He was hot, as they said, because, he clearly was impassioned by what happened today. We know what happened last week and kind of the cross he had to bear as being the one who fumbled the ball on the 2-yard line down in Miami. And so just a very raw interview with him, a couple profane words. If you're a little bit worried about that, then maybe you should steer clear of that interview. But certainly it just sounds like a group of guys who don't understand where a lot of this is coming from. And Christian Kirk really pinpointed to miscommunication, especially in the first half. And Mike DeRocco of ESPN just asked him and said, this is largely the same group that's been together for 2 years. So where does this miscommunication come from? And Christian said that's the frustrating part. And so hopefully after they watch the tape back, we'll have a better idea specifically of where those miscommunications came from, I guess you could say. But Christian said, especially in the first half, he felt like that was a major issue as to why the offense was stimming so much.
Yeah, you said it. I think, it's one thing for miscommunication to be the issue, but the fact that, we've heard that miscommunication and execution, I feel like those have been the two main excuses from coaches and players going back to the beginning of last year, maybe even in 2022 whenever they lost a game during that season. And so, yeah, it's just troubling that it's kind of like the same thing over and over. It feels like Groundhog Day after every loss. I did want to ask you, I know that in the locker room last week in Miami, you were asking players what the feeling was in the locker room after that loss compared to losses last year. And so my question is just from your perspective, how has the locker room felt after both last week against Miami in Miami and then today against the Browns? How has it felt to you compared to last year?
Right. It's definitely a frustrated locker room. I would say last year, and this isn't even just from me, this is from Dewey Wingard. Dewey said to me back in June, was there a little bit of imposter syndrome? He thinks yes last year, where as they lost 5 of 6, this question of, oh no, are we no longer that team crept in? I think the problem is this group knows that they are a good team and they just can't figure out what's in their way. Or maybe, I know some of you in the comments will love that I'm going to say this. Maybe they know what's in their way and they can't fix it because it requires something above their pay grade, if you know what I mean. And so I think maybe that's where some of the frustration lies, because I just can't come away from that comment from Christian. I tried to pry a little bit, and I understand and respect, he's never going to throw anyone under the bus. But, I just said to him, I'm like, is it the operation as a whole, and who does that responsibility fall to? And of course he said, we'll watch the tape back and it's about execution in each individual person. We can't put a finger on what it is exactly, but I just couldn't come away from that and not wonder if there is some frustration or some friction between someone and someone, and not saying that there's infighting, because that's the one thing Christian said. He's like, I don't want to hear anything about this locker room isn't sticking together. The locker room is together. So where is the conflict coming from? I'll let everybody else kind of fill in the blank there as to where that potentially could be coming from.
Yeah, I think that's part of the frustration is that it's not like you can point to today or even week 1 and say for instance, the offensive line just didn't do its job. And if we clean that up, then we feel really good moving forward. It's just a bunch of different things. It's the offensive line, it's the quarterback, it's a couple of drops or not correct reads in the run game by running backs. There's just a laundry list of mistakes that are all seem more like the process and organizational rather than just one specific unit or player messing up. And so I guess if you had to point the finger, Mia, to one position group or player, not that any one player again deserves the blame, but just where did you see the biggest just loss or the biggest negative that pointed towards a loss?
Yeah, here's the funny part, Gus. I would say that I expected the defensive front to get not only more pressure, but to stop the run more effectively like they did a week ago. But let's be real, the Browns, you knew were going to lean into their offensive line, given the fact that Deshaun Watson in 2024 is their quarterback. There was no way that they weren't going to lean into Jerome Ford and their army of tailbacks. because Deshaun Watson at this current juncture is limited. And so I think that, let's make sure that wind doesn't maybe again, a little windy here. Up there we go. Jason's coming through. So all good. We're going to turn them this way so we don't have any logos behind us. There we go. But yeah, I mean, I think that it was a little disappointing to see how much the Browns were able to run the ball, especially in the first half of this game. And while the sacks eventually did come, I mean, Josh Hines-Allen gets in the backfield, Roy Robertson-Harris, like there was pressure to be had. I still feel like they left some meat on the bone comparatively to where I thought they would be going up against a third-string left tackle and a fourth-string right tackle for much of the game.
Absolutely. Sticking with the defensive line, there was a little bit of a surprise before the game when second-round rookie Mason Smith was ruled inactive for the game. I know it was kind of a surprise to pretty much everyone at the time. Now that we're a few hours away, do you have any thoughts on like why that was?
I don't have any answers yet. I didn't get a chance to speak. I don't think Doug was asked, or at least I haven't seen anything because I was in the locker room. But certainly it was a bit of a head scratcher. Jeremiah Ledbetter being active perhaps was the trade-off there, although I would argue they play two different positions. And so maybe it was to get some run out of Asezi Otomewo, a player who's been in the organization and been in the pipeline for over a year now, and see what he could do off the edge. I mean, look, Gus, Mason Smith looked awesome last week. And so unless he's hurt, I don't really know why he would be inactive for this game. Again, this is also a defense that is relying on shifts, and it's trying to keep guys fresh. And so maybe this was, hey, let's see what the guys who were inactive last week can do, and then we'll evaluate and make our decision from there. But for me, seeing the fact that he drew 2 holding penalties last week against the Dolphins, he created such interior pass rush that the Jaguars lacked so much a year ago. I just don't understand that one for the life of me. And I understand Jeremiah Ledbetter in theory would be better in the run game for you, and he is more of that true nose tackle to back up Devon Hamilton. Had a feeling Jordan Jefferson would be inactive again because he really didn't have a training camp. But that one certainly, that one was a little weird for me, especially since Tyler Lacey also inactive in this one.
Yeah, Randy Connolly commented on YouTube, was Mason Smith under the weather, hence being out for the game? But I don't think so, because I think usually when players are held out because of an illness or from being under the weather, that shows up in the injury report as being out from an illness. And so that makes it kind of even more confusing.
And by the way, Randy, he was walking around pregame, and granted, he was in slides, flip-flops, but Mason was out here. It wasn't like he was away from the team because of illness. And if he was, well, it must not have been contagious because he was on the sidelines when I was here during pregame warm-up. So definitely a head scratcher. Not to say one player would have made the difference in the ballgame, because at the end of the day, the Jaguars defense gave up 16 points. That should be enough to win you a football game once again, even with their struggles in this one. One little note that I have, Gus, is that the Jaguars have yet to record a takeaway. And I'm not going to try and defend the previous regime and say that the think takeaways mentality was so critical last year in the first half of the season, because it did certainly disappear under that same regime in the second half of the season. But it is interesting because obviously everyone in the press box was saying, and you heard it, if there was a takeaway at this moment, if there was a takeaway at that moment, some sort of critical turnover that the Jaguars defense could force would have swung momentum, just like the Brian Thomas Jr. 66-yard catch.
For sure. All right, Mia, I'll let you get up to the press box. Any other lingering takeaways, or we'll just see you tomorrow on Helmets and Heels for any other thoughts you have?
Stay tuned to Quick Hits. Those will be popping up on 1010XL here shortly. And then I will also, again, have Helmets and Heels tomorrow, 12 to 2. And a whole lot more cooking from us on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel, as well as all of our social and digital channels.
Sweet. All right, Mia, appreciate you coming on from the field. We will be looking forward to having you after each game live from wherever the Jaguars are playing, or just be joined by you live after every game. So thanks.
I kind of like this, Gus. This actually worked out great. Let's do this more often. Let's just hopefully do it. Let's just do it after a Jaguars win. How does that sound?
That sounds good. All right, Mia. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Later.
All right, y'all. It's officially chat therapy time. So if anyone else has any more comments, questions, concerns, we didn't throw that. Reedy said 3 weeks ago I was looking forward to the season, and now I'm dreading every game. Happens quick, doesn't it? Yeah, it's funny. I mean, Hacker was saying that the offseason is kind of the time of, I forget his exact phrase, but basically the time of hopes and dreams. And then it all, at least this year, kind of comes crashing down in just 10 short days. So, yeah, I don't know if I have really anything else to add. My main two things were just that I don't think Trevor is blameless for the loss, but at the same time, I think the offense of play calling could give him kind of like easier buttons to click and just get him some like easier completions. Someone was in the comments earlier saying the offense could do a better job of getting Trevor kind of into a groove. And I agree with that. I feel like Trevor wasn't really in a groove until the Jaguars still started going no huddle in the third quarter. And then they were able to kind of like build some momentum, build some consistency. So that was nice to see, but it was a little bit too little too late. And then the other main takeaway I had was just that, like I was just telling Mia, it's not like there was just one problem, like the offensive line or like, oh, the receivers had drops, or there's not one thing you can point to, which just makes it more concerning overall and makes it more understandable for people to be just voicing their frustrations about Doug Peterson. Millen posted on YouTube, fully on the Mike Vrabel as head coach with Belichick as EVP, executive vice president of football train. Yeah, someone actually asked me last week how I'd feel about Mike Vrabel, and at first I laughed just because it seemed like that reality was so far away. But now, like, it's tough to have as bad of an 0-2 start as you can if you're the Jaguars, even if both losses were a one-score difference. And so it's not like the Jaguars got blown out in either game. Definitely understand people like looking forward to seeing who might be the next head coach for the Jaguars if Peterson doesn't make it to 2025. And so let's see, if I had an official guess for who's going to be the next coach not named Peterson, assuming it's not Peterson in 2025, I would say I would expect Nielsen to probably be just promoted to head coach from defensive coordinator. But if they decide to clean house and get someone from outside of the building, then honestly, I think Vrabel might be a pretty interesting choice. Maybe Ben Johnson, too, from Detroit, although Ben Johnson has gone back-to-back off seasons just staying with the Lions because there hasn't been a job out there that he likes enough. And so maybe he'll like the opportunity to coach Trevor Lawrence. But, yeah, I think that's still a ways away. I said last week that I think if, like, the Jags come back from their London trip and it's still similar vibes, then maybe we see, like, Doug being fired or someone on the coaching staff being fired really heat up. But yeah, until the end of the London trip, I think it would be pretty shocking if a significant move was made. Taylor B commented on YouTube, Ezra Cleveland still an X factor? All I'll say is that Ezra Cleveland has not been the worst offensive lineman. Tommy mentioned this when he first came on. Like he thought we were supposed to have the 3 best offensive tackles in the league, or maybe not the 1, 2, 3 best offensive tackles, but in terms of just starters and depth, like there's not a lot of teams that had a better 3 cumulative offensive tackles than the Jaguars entering the season between Cam Robinson, Walker Little, and then Anton Harrison on the right side. But yeah, Anton has been pretty disappointing to start his season, especially as a young second-year player who a lot of people were expecting to break out. And then Cam Robinson has been maybe the worst offensive player for the Jaguars to start the last 2 games. Mitch Morse has been not a complete disappointment, but disappointing relative to expectations, especially after replacing Luke Fortner. And then Brandon Sheriff continues to get a year older. And so I don't know if I would say Ezra has been the best offensive lineman, but again, he certainly hasn't been the worst. Taylor also said, do not want the Mike Vrabel offense here. Well, he would just be hiring an offensive coordinator since he's a defensive-minded head coach. And so I do think it's fair to say, like, maybe you want an offensive-minded head coach to just pair with Lawrence in the long term because you do have a franchise quarterback who just signed a monster contract extension. Reedy said, I see BTJ being a future Pro Bowler, but only if we throw him the ball. That's fair, Reedy. That's very fair. I would like to see Brian get used just more anywhere. Like people were saying when he was coming out of LSU, oh, he only runs like hitch route and go routes, and that's it. And so I think would have been fair to hope that the Jaguars would try to like just like spread out his route tree a little bit more and get him active doing a lot more different things. We saw him catching like screen passes during training camp and just trying to get him the ball in different ways. And I feel like we haven't really seen that much in the first 2 weeks. And so it's pretty disappointing that while it's impressive that Brian Thomas had 2 like huge plays on go routes or just deep balls, like it would be nice to see him kind of put together more of a well-rounded game, and that feels more like it's on the coaching staff than on Brian. Like we saw in the preseason game against Atlanta, Tommy was mentioning this, where Brian ran like a deep crossing route over the middle of the field and was wide open and picked up a big first down. But I mean, feels like, I know you had like one crossing route for like 6 yards against the Dolphins, but it would be nice to see him targeted a little bit more there, because they're utilizing his speed on vertical routes, but not as much on horizontal routes. We've seen that a lot with like Evan Engram just being used on drags across the formation, short yardage or short A dot. And so I think BTJ definitely needs to get more involved based on his performance the first 2 weeks. Robert said Peterson looks like he saw a ghost, or the unemployment line. Ghost. Yeah. Honestly, Peterson is like kind of a weird press conference guy. Like after games, he always shows up like as if he had like just like returned from war. And then press conferences during the week, he's always like a little bit moody, I guess. And so yeah, it's certainly an experience going to press conferences with Doug Peterson. Randy Conley is vouching for Belichick and John Gruden. That would be quite something. That Jags PR would definitely have to be doing a lot of spinning for that, but I don't like. You might not be able to get two better just football minds into the building than hiring Bill Belichick and John Gruden. Abdullah commented on Facebook, Trevor Bank, the place where dreams don't come true. That definitely seemed like the biggest jinx of all time, didn't it? Let's see what else we got. Randy Connolly said they need some ass kickers as coaches. I feel like that's kind of what Nielsen was pegged as, and that's why fans got so excited. But yeah, they clearly need some more juice on the sidelines for all 4 quarters. He can't draft worth a crap, says Robert. I assume he's talking about Balky. Man, Trayvon Walker is not a bust, but it's tough watching Aiden Hutchinson continue to just ascend and improve his game week after week. I think he had 3 sacks in the first half today against the Buccaneers. And so, yeah, not just Trayvon, but there's a lot of questionable draft choices made by Balky and the team, especially after starting the season 0-2. Reed Hawkins asked, any positives from the game? I would say it was nice to see ETN bounce back a little bit. He had a touchdown and then maybe not a crazy efficient day, but I thought he had a pretty good second half. And so it was nice to see a bounce back from him, even if we didn't get the same thing from Christian Kirk. Brenton Strange didn't really do anything spectacular, in my opinion, but it was still good to see him step up in Evan Engram's absence. Let's see. Obviously, Brian Thomas was a bright spot, but excuse me. Yeah, I'm struggling to think. It's going to be easier to go back and watch the tape and be able to see each play in detail, play by play. But I feel like there was a guy on defense that I wanted to shout out, and now I'm just kind of blanking. It's hard to draw a lot of positives at this point. Randy Connolly said, bring in Brady as a player coach. Yeah, that would certainly be a choice, to bring in Tom Brady for his first ever coaching gig. That would definitely be very desperate. Reedy said it's like the front office thinks that bringing in Mitch Morse will fix offensive line. Yeah, I think even during the offseason, like it was fair to hope that just the upgrade alone at the pivot at the center position from Luke Fortner to Mitch Morse was going to upgrade the offensive line, but it was pretty foolish to expect that it was just going to completely fix all like mistakes or mishaps or miscommunications, whatever you want to call it, on the offensive line. Like if anything, best case scenario, adding Mitch Morse at age 32 or 31 when he was just cut by the Bills in the offseason, which allowed him to get scooped up by the Jaguars. Like that should have made the Jags running game or just offensive line go from like a bottom 5 unit to an average unit at the absolute best. But now we're seeing that it's probably going to be a little bit smaller of a difference maker than that even. And so, yeah, like really just every position or every player on the offensive line needs to just perform better going forward. Milan said on YouTube, under center play action led to that BTJ completion. Need more of it. I would actually argue that the Jags need less of it. Clearly, their plan going into this season and even last season, but it kind of got disrupted a little bit by various injuries to the offense. But the Jaguars' plan is to get more under center because that would kind of like help open up the run game and diversify the run game. And then typically, just in general, like it's better to run from under center than from shotgun because, I mean, you get more diversity and are able to call like a bunch of different plays when you're under center as opposed to having the back next to you in shotgun. But then also like the running backs will get a little bit of a head of steam and like be able to see things a little bit more clearly. I don't know. Typically under center run games work a little bit better than shotgun run games. And then I think the Jaguars wanted to like utilize a lot of play action off of that to kind of make things easier for Trevor Lawrence. Like we've seen the way the play action has helped quarterbacks like Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield and Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, the list goes on. Ryan Tannehill when he was with the Titans. But then also I think play action they wanted to utilize to just take advantage of Trevor Lawrence's athleticism because he's so good at just throwing on the run and just is a better runner than I think he's probably generally given credit for. But at this point, I feel like the Jags are spamming the under center and play action stuff a little bit too hard. Like they want it to be their identity, but it's just not really quite working. And as I've said a few times already on this show, I think it would benefit the Jaguars to just get some quick game going with Lawrence and get him some easier completions, get him in a little bit more of a rhythm, and just, again, click more of the easy buttons because I think the Jags think they're doing that by doing play action. But then all of a sudden it's like a first down bootleg rollout and Lawrence has pressure in his face from an unblocked defender and he has to like whiz a ball over to Christian Kirk in the flat. And so it's easier said than done. But yeah, I think obviously it was nice to see that under center play action lead to the Ryan Thomas Jr. completion, but I don't think they need to spam it quite as much. Randy said, need more speed here. I mean, between Brian, Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, Travis Etienne, Gabe Davis isn't the fastest guy, but he is like a good enough deep threat because he's able to he has decent like build up acceleration kind of once he gets a few steps into his route. And then he's a big body that can kind of get contested catches. And so it's honestly, I think a little bit worrisome that the Jags already have so much speed. And now people are saying that they need to add more. Kevin Riley said on YouTube, the interior offensive line fails to get any push for any type of middle running. Yeah, it feels like anytime the Jaguars have success running up the middle, it's because of like some interesting like run scheme where like there's like multiple pullers or they run like trap or something that's like not just like something simple like inside zone. And so like it seems like they really have to like scheme their way to get any yards in the running game, which is pretty concerning. Robert said, at least Trevor said the Jags suck right now. I haven't seen Trevor's post-game press conference, but I can imagine it was worth watching because this game is probably the most animated that I've seen Trevor in terms of just being pissed and kind of letting his competitiveness show with his body language. There was a comment earlier that said we need more fire from Lawrence, and even if we need better performances from Lawrence, I would agree with that, but I don't know about the part with for more fire from Lawrence. I think even if he doesn't show his fire as much as you might want, like I can promise you that he's one of the most competitive people on the team. And so again, like we kind of saw that come out a little bit more in this game. And again, I haven't gone to his press conference yet, but that's probably a must watch. Mark Thomas said, time to pick from the Shanahan tree if Doug can't get it right. I think that's pretty fair. One thing that's impressive about the Shanahan tree is not just Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, but also Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, and a handful of other guys are really good at like adjusting and adding to their system rather than just being like, okay, we've got like wide zone and bootlegs down pat, and so we're good. No, like they, especially McVay and Shanahan, have been kind of like diversifying their run game, going more from wide zone to a lot of different gap and power runs and doing a lot of different stuff in the passing game as well. Like now that McVay has Matt Stafford, they're doing a ton of cool stuff out of empty and like really true drop back stuff. And so the Shanahan tree, I think, is most interesting to me because of not just how good the base system is, but how good many of those coaches have proven to be continuing to adjust week after week and year after year. And so I think that's fair, Mark, where if Doug is on his way out of Jacksonville, then the Shanahan tree should be the first place that Shad Khan the decision makers look for the next head coach. Professor Murph said on YouTube, Minshew beat the Ravens today. Okay. Thank you. Taylor B said, feels like we should have a fullback since we don't get enough push on short yardage runs. I think that would be interesting. The Jaguars have toyed around with some like 21 type personnel usage, which is 2 running backs and 1 tight end and 2 receivers. But then when they use that quote unquote 2 running back personnel, as in like bringing a fullback onto the field, they usually have a tight end in that fullback spot. And so the thing with fullbacks is that there's like 2 good ones out there. Like there's Kyle Juszczyk and then like maybe CJ Ham in Minnesota. Like there's probably like 1 or 2 other good ones, but it's hard to find a good fullback who will actually kind of like make a difference. And so that's kind of easier said than done than adding that position to the offense. But hey, I mean, any new ideas is probably welcome at this point. Alon said Buster Brown was a positive. Thank you. That was definitely the defender I was trying to think of earlier, where if we can take away any positives from this game, Buster Brown was definitely a highlight. I thought Ronald Darby also had a really good game, even though he had dropped an interception early in the game. And I think he might have led up like maybe one other big-ish play. But I've been pretty impressed by Darby by 2 weeks. And then Buster Brown for sure today, stepping up in place of Tyson Campbell, who was placed on short-term injured reserve after sustaining a hamstring injury in week 1 against the Dolphins. But yeah, so Buster Brown was definitely targeted a lot as opposed to the veteran Ronald Darby on the other side. But Buster definitely held his own. And so it was an impressive performance by Buster, who I think is in his 3rd year now and was a former 7th round pick. Robert said Farrell needs the ball more. I don't know. He had 1 catch, maybe. He and Strange are kind of like the same guys to me, where they're not nobodies, but they're not much more than that. I don't know. Foye had a nice game too, as Floyd pointed out. He had a sack against Watson, I think, in the first half. And, I mean, it's just Foye being Foye, flying all over the place. Taylor B asked, if the season continues to go off the rails, do we start selling at the deadline? I would be pretty shocked. I think there's maybe, specific players, like a Cam Robinson maybe, who's, in the final year of his contract, and he's not really performing well. And so, for that reason, I don't know if any team would be interested in acquiring him. But I think there would only be, a small handful of players that the Jaguars would actually be interested in kind of shopping or selling at the trade deadline. But the way this team is set up, even though Trevor did just sign his huge contract extension, the big money isn't really going to start coming in for him until 2026 or 2027 or so. And so this team is definitely, even if this season ends up going to waste in general, for the next 2 or 3 years, the Jaguars are definitely in a contending window, having Trevor Lawrence not being too expensive quite yet. And so maybe a Cam Robinson or one other player gets added to the block for the Jaguars around the time of the deadline. But I certainly don't think the Jaguars are going to be huge sellers or anything, even if they don't have a win by October. Adrian commented, the legal shift penalty on Johnson was big because we did score on that play, but it got called back. True that. Reedy said being a Jags fan is frustrating. I don't know how we do it, man. I don't know. Just buy in every single offseason. It's crazy. Taylor asked, who gets fired first, Doug Peterson or Scott Strickland? That's a good question because I feel like both of those guys have a little bit longer leashes than fans might hope. I don't know. I guess I'll go with Doug Peterson because even though I'm a Gator grad, I don't have a problem saying that I think Strickland should definitely be on his way out from the University of Florida. But considering he is not the commissioner, the general administrator, I forget what his title is, but considering he has such a high title, I think it's going to be pretty hard for him to go out. I think Napier will probably be gone within a month or after the Georgia game at the very latest. But Strickland, I feel like, could survive the rest of the season. Reedy said the safety late in the fourth quarter was so frustrating to watch. Yeah, it's hard to really know. I mean, obviously the offensive line kind of allowed the pressure, but Trevor probably could have, should have, would have thrown the ball away and lived to see another down, even if those kind of an easier throwaway said than done. Adam said, anyone find Christian Kirk, or is he still on the back of a milk carton? As in expired, I suppose. Yeah, no, pretty disappointing. Like I said earlier, I thought it was going to be a bounce back from him, and it wasn't. And so maybe the calf injury that he had in the offseason is still lingering a little bit. Yeah, tough stuff. Jim pointed out on Facebook, we are undefeated in the preseason. That's never a good sign, is it? Robert said, between Sheriff and Anton, Jags are going 0-4. Yeah, that was supposed to be the right side, was supposed to be really the good side of the offensive line, and now there just isn't a good offensive line. Adam said Tampa Bay lost their offensive coordinator to Carolina and are still rolling. I think we know where the problem is. Press. Yeah. Jason said, you are too young to know. Missing people used to have picks on no cards. True. Yeah. I guess cereal boxes for me. That was always my favorite, was doing little maps on the cereal box as I was watching SportsCenter before school. So, yeah, fortunately for me, I'm also too young to really know what it's really like to be just a lifelong Jaguars fan and experience the misery. But I'm right there with y'all. I'll be right there with y'all after each game this season. Duval Rundown also goes live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Injury Care Centers for sponsoring. Go do something you enjoy for the rest of the Sunday. Go find something you like doing other than watching Jaguars football and hoping for a win, because it's tough to rely on something kind of out of your control for happiness or contention, or to be content or whatever. So go do something that you enjoy. Go try to find some time outside to spend, get some fresh air. Yeah, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Thanks again.